the radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Sunday night. Hope you're having a great weekend. I guess it's a long weekend. Tomorrow, it turns out, is a holiday. That's good. So hopefully everybody's having a great long weekend, having a good time. As always, the weather here in Puerto Rico is amazing, and today was a good day, relaxing and fun. All right, what do we got? We're going to talk about, I don't know what we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about Yaron Rules for Life. It's part 16. I wonder how long this is going to go. How many rules for life do you think we're going to end up with? I'm not sure, but we'll see. Probably, what did Jordan do? Jordan did 12 and then 12, 24. So we can do 24. Kind of wrap up the year. We'll do one a month, and we'll wrap up the year with 24 rules for life. And then we'll have to think of something new to do on the positive aspects of the Yaron Brook Show and how to live a good life. All right, so you all know today we're talking about, oh, Jonathan, thank you for the support, ongoing support, regular support, really appreciate it. Today we're going to talk about justice. We're going to talk about justice in the context of Yaron's Rules for Life. So we're going to talk a little bit about, we're going to talk about the virtue of justice, and then we're going to talk about how to cultivate that virtue, how to make that virtue part of your life, how to build a life around that virtue. So that's going to be a focus today. Of course, you can ask questions. It always makes the Yaron Brook Show more interesting. You can ask questions about anything. Be great if we got a bunch of questions about justice and what to do about justice, about people that are good, about people that are bad, and how to treat them and how to relate to them and all of that. So that would be fantastic if we could get a bunch of questions around justice. But of course, you can ask questions about anything on the Yaron Brook Show. I don't always have answers, but I often do. So feel free to ask about anything, and here I try to apply my understanding of Ayn Rand's ideas to the issues of the day, to the questions that you ask, to the things that are top of your mind. So Super Chat is open. Guy Lemon, thank you for the support. And so you can use the Super Chat to just support the show. You can use the Super Chat to ask questions. You can use the Super Chat to make comments. But the Super Chat is an amazing feature that allows you to trade with me and, I guess, show your appreciation and a value for what you get from the show. Hopefully you get something from the show. That's why you're here. $20 Super Chats, of course, get priority. But again, $2, $20, $100, $500, whatever it takes. Feel free to jump in. Daniel, thank you. So far, nobody has any questions. They're just rolling in the appreciation. So thanks, everybody. All right, so today we're going to talk about justice. And we're going to try to apply it and break it down and maybe do some exercises on how to cultivate it and how to make it part of your life because it is a crucial virtue. Of course, all the rules for life at the Yaron Brook Show are centered around the idea that your life is important to you. They're centered around the idea of you should be selfish. Selfish in the sense of rationally, long-term. And you should always pursue your self-interest, your values, your well-being, that life is too short not to do so. And that any second wasted is wasted. It's you can't get it back. You can't get it back. So the whole idea of the rules for life is guidance on how to live the fullest, how to live the most impactful, meaningful, and ultimately happiest life you possibly can. Right? Now, because one of the greatest sources of joy, of happiness, is our relationships with other people, close relationship, father relationship. Just the fact that we live in a social context provides us with immense opportunities to be productive, to engage in productive activity, to trade, to consume amazing things that we could never consume if we did not live in a social environment. But of course, the fact that you live in a social environment means that you interact with other people. And the question is, of course, what should guide that interaction? What should be the principles by which one should engage in interaction, in these interactions with other people? Other people can be a great source of joy, a great source of pleasure, a great source of stimulation, but they can also be a great source of pain in the neck. They can also be a great source of angst, anguish, frustration, and even a source of real harm. And part of life, part of the important aspect of life is to navigate all that. An important aspect of life, of a successful life, of a happy life, of a fulfilling life, is to navigate one's relationships with other people. It's to figure out which relationships are worthwhile and which relationship one should invest in. One should dedicate oneself to improving and to spending more time because they are positive. And which relationships should be ended, should be stopped because they are harmful, because they're destructive, because they do pain and damage to one's joy and happiness. And the standard by which one determines these things is the concept of justice. The idea of treating people the way they deserve. Treating people in the way that their actions, in the way that their behavior, in the way that their moral character deserves. In the context of your own life, in the context of your own pursuit of your own life and your own happiness. So, good people should be rewarded. That is the just thing. Good people should be supported. Good people should be acknowledged for their goodness. And bad people should be punished. This is the idea of justice, rewarding the good, punishing evil. And in the context of your own life, what's important here is to identify the people who are positive, have a positive impact on your life, and identify people who have a negative impact on your life, and act accordingly. Act accordingly. And of course, all this demands that one understand why somebody is having a positive impact on your life, why somebody is having a negative impact on life. I mean, this is not, not supposed to be some kind of emotionalistic thing. It's, okay, I really don't like Joe. Why don't I like him? Because he lies. Well, then it's easy. He's immoral. He's somebody to distance oneself from. He's somebody that can only do your life harm and damage. And it's something that you want to avoid. Joey's fun. Joey's fun. When you hang around him, fun. It's exciting. But is it good? Is it good? Is the relationship with him something that is just a flash in the pan, fun, but ultimately can lead to destructive behavior? Or is it really good in a sense that it's fun and you can build on it and something will actually will lead to you being more successful, to you having a better life? Yeah, Jose, you should put that in a super chat, and I will definitely do that. So evaluate the people around you, but evaluate them rationally. Evaluate them based on the facts. Evaluate them based on the standard of your own life and the value or disvalue that they create for you. So one of the most important things in cultivating the virtue of justice in the context of your own life and your own pursuit of happiness is to really spend some time, and maybe do this fairly regularly, in evaluating the relationships that you have with people. Make a list of your friends and acquaintances, family members you have relationships with, people you relate to at work, at home, family, friends, everything. And then think about them. Evaluate them. To what extent does this person, any particular person, benefit your life? To what extent are they helping you further your values? What is their moral character? Are they good or are they not? And it's hard to do, because sometimes this will involve people that you have a long-term relationship with. This will involve people that you grew up with, family members. This will involve people that you might be childhood friends with. This might involve your coworkers, your boss, the people who report to you. But you've got to have a clear understanding of who they are, what their relationship is to you, and whether they're good for you or bad for you, whether they're a value or disvalue. Because that should and will determine your behavior towards them. You want to cultivate positive, healthy, good relationships. You want to have a list of people that you really want to have good relationships with because they're of value to you. And also, if you evaluate people as good, part of justice is tell them, appreciate them, pat them on the shoulder. In that sense, your list could include people who, on the plus side certainly, who you don't have a personal relationship with, but who have impacted your life. People you admire, people you respect, people you look up to. And in those cases, tell them so. Send them an email. Send them a text. Say, really appreciate what you've done to my life. You're a good guy. You're one of the good guys. I've learned so much. Whatever it happens to be. The value of supporting the good is immense. And when it comes to justice, this is what's important with regard to justice. What's really important with regard to justice is the support of the good. And that's true of people within your world, people you have personal relationships. Do you tell your friends often enough that you really value them? Do you tell family members who you love or who are really values to you that you love them and that they're a value to you? Do you show your appreciation? Do you express it? That's the act of justice, expressing it and then acting based on that. So I want to emphasize that when we talk about justice so often, because We think of the justice system, punishing crooks. The focus is almost always on the negative, and I talked about this when I talked about the virtue of justice in the series I did about the virtues. But the real act of justice, the act of justice that most supports your life, that most supports life in general and ability to grow and flourish and be happy, is supporting the good, is appreciating the good. And that means more of that good in your life. But it also means the good, you know, is bolstered. The good is helped. And to the extent that the good is something that promotes your life in one way or another, just bolstering them in any kind of way will ultimately help you. And we all need good people in the world around us. We all need the success of good people around us. We, again, in the news and in our day-to-day living, we so easily focus on the negative. We so easily focus on the bad guys. We so easily focus on what we hate, what we dislike, what we want changed. Other people who have done bad things to us or bad things to the world, or, you know, and the news is like this. The news is almost all exclusively focused on all the bad things happen in the world, all the evil people out there, all the disgusting stuff that's going on. But there's a bunch of good stuff that's happening. There's a bunch of good people out there. There's a lot that supports our life. There's a lot of positive news. Nobody reports it. But one of the reasons nobody reports it is because we as consumers are not interested in it. We're much more interested in the negative, the bad. So much of our world is focused on evil. Right. So identify the good in the world out there. Identify the heroes in the world out there. Identify, and again, it's going to be hard to find perfection. But if you see a businessman doing a good job, say something. If you have a waitress who does a particularly good job, leave a bigger tip. Say thank you. Wherever you see goodness in the world, stop and appreciate it. And give it some feedback. We're so good at bitching and complaining. So I think that's my main thrust in cultivating the virtue of justice is focus on the good people in your life, invest in them, focus on the good in the world, invest in it, invest your time, invest your energy, invest what you say in the good in the world around you. And again, it's the one thing that we're not very good at doing. One thing that we're not very good at doing. The flip side of that is that you want to distance yourself from people who do you harm. And this can be hard. It could be family members who lie to you, who leech off of you, parasitic, who are just, it could be friends who want to get you in trouble constantly, who provide no real value to your life. You gotta stop. You gotta stop any destructive behavior to your life. You've got to cut off those relationships. It's hard. But make a list of people. And again, rank them. Give them a grade. How destructive, how helpful are they? And to the extent that they are destructive, to the extent that the destructive part of them is more part of your relationship with them than the good, and to the extent that that is their fault, not yours, because sometimes it's going to be your fault, you've got to walk away from those relationships. life is too precious. Time is too valuable. You've got to invest in the good and disinvest from bad. Now, and this is hard. It's been hard for me. It's hard for anybody. First of all, to recognize that somebody is doing you harm. And then have the courage to walk away. Have the courage to walk away. And in some cases, have the courage to fight them if they're really becoming your enemies. You know, some people are your enemies. It's good to have a list of enemies. Isn't there a saying that's somewhere that says that if you don't have enemies, you haven't really lived, or you haven't really stood for your values, or something like that? Well, I take pride in the fact that I have enemies. I have people who really dislike me, people who would like to destroy me. It's good. It means I've done something. But it's really, really important to identify those people and either get away from them, or if you can't fight them, and if they need to be fought, fight them. But it's good to make all that conscious, and it's good to make all that rational. Are they your enemies for rational reason, from your perspective, rational? That is, are they truly hurting you? Are they truly after you? Or are you just being paranoid? Is the person really hurting you? Is the person really doing damage to you? Or is it just your emotionalism that's driving you towards that conclusion? But we all have friends that are not good for us, at least in certain periods in our lives. We've all had family members that just make you miserable, right? Make you miserable. So, the big thing about this is figure out who's who. And don't just do it once. It's an ongoing challenge. Figure out who's who. Figure out who your real friends are. Figure out who's bad for you. And act on it, act on it, act on it. Don't just accept it. And it can get tricky. And, again, if you want to ask questions about particular specifics, anything related to this, feel free to do so in the super chat. One of the issues I want to cover when it comes to this issue of justice, and that is justice towards oneself. I think somebody raised it up in the chat. You've got to make the same evaluation of yourself. Indeed, it's hard to evaluate other people without having an objective view of you, of yourself. Are you good? Are you good to yourself? To what extent are you acting based on your virtues? To what extent are you rational? To what extent are you living a good life? And if you're not, why? And sometimes you might beat yourself up for not being good. And it's important not to beat yourself up, but rather to figure out what's going on. Why am I doing these irrational things? Or why am I acting in this wrong way? How do I improve myself? How do I become the best version of myself possible? How do I live the best life that I can live for myself? So use whatever negative estimation you have, not to beat yourself up. There's no value in that. You're too precious to you. There's no alternative but you. You can walk away from people who do bad things to you. You can't walk away from yourself. If you do bad things to yourself, your job is to fix it. Not beat yourself up, but figure out how to do it better, how not to make the same mistake, how to get on the right track. And again, I think Rand's virtues are the best way to evaluate that. And of course, having a good psychologist often is good. So figure out, pat yourself on the back for the good things that you do. But be objective about them. Be objective about the bad things. But don't just evaluate them, that's bad, okay. But then have a plan. How do I stop doing that? How do I do it differently? How do I fix it? So, there's a lot we can talk about in terms of forgiveness to other people, which is also an issue of justice. When should one forgive? How one should forgive? But think about forgiving yourself. And just like forgiving somebody else, you forgive somebody else. I mean, certain things are unforgivable, but you forgive somebody else, and certain things you do to yourself are unforgivable. We can talk about that. But you forgive somebody else when they show regret, but that's not enough. They have to do something, some kind of recompense. They have to show, thank you, Jamie, they have to show that they understood what they did is wrong, and they're acting to fix it. And you, if you're trying to forgive yourself, if you're judging yourself, you have to first recognize what you did is wrong, what you did is wrong, in what way was it wrong, and then you have to commit yourself to fixing it. You have to commit yourself to the actions necessary so you will never do it again. And it's not just the negative, you will never do it again, but you will do good. You will do right. And good and right by whom? By you. You are the standard. Wanda Freeman says, which songs support this theme? I don't know. I'm not good at retrieving that kind of material. Maybe you guys have ideas on which songs are consistent with this theme of justice. Oh, you're my best friend from Queen. I've been with you such a long time. You're the only one. Yeah, but I don't know that there's any content to the lyrics other than you're my best friend. Is there any content that suggests justice? Not sure. So be just to yourself. Evaluate yourself objectively. And again, the way to evaluate other people is objectively. So forgiveness. People can do bad stuff. And if they are of value to you, forgiveness is an option. But forgiveness actually requires them, or if you're the one asking forgiveness, requires you to again recognize what you did wrong and try to compensate for whatever damage you did and articulate why it will never be done again. Act in a way as to guarantee that it'll never be done again. Some acts are unforgivable. I don't know. I don't understand it when, I don't know, you hear about this brutal murder. I don't know, somebody murders your kids, and then the parent says, oh, I forgive the murderer. How can they forgive them? How is that even possible? How is it possible when somebody takes away one of your greatest values that you say, oh, I forgive them? I mean, that if that's not altruism, I don't know what is. It's evil to forgive evil like that. It's self-destructive. And in this sense, hatred is an act of justice, and hatred is an act of psychological health. Some people deserve hatred. Wow, we've got a bunch of interesting songs here. Shower the people. Shower the people you love. That's good. I like that. That's James Taylor, right? James Taylor, yeah. All right. I used to listen to James Taylor. You're my sunshine. You're my best friend. You are the wind beneath my wings, Debbie Boone. Isn't there, what's that from Beaches? There's a Beaches, you are, maybe it's one of these songs. Just the way you are, Billy Joel. But yeah, but is that what we want? Is just the way you are? I mean, it seems to like, forgiveness as a form of charity. I don't even know what that means. Forgiving evil is betraying the good, absolutely. It's betraying yourself, and it's betraying every good person you know. You cannot forgive evil. Certain acts can be forgiven under certain circumstances. But pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and start all over. That's a song. Beaches, the wind beneath my wings. There you go. Thank you. Thank you. Wind beneath the wings. That's two sisters, I think, right? But it's a value. Nobody Does It Better by Carly Simon. There you go. All right. Good ones. You are the cherry on my sundae. I don't know what that is. All right, so justice. It deserves your attention. It deserves your focus. We interact with people all the time. We get values from people all the time. Many people provide us with disvalues, unfortunately, all the time. We got to evaluate, we got to judge. Judge them. Be prepared to be judged yourself. But judge them. Judge yourself. Objectively, rationally. Promote the good. Support the good. Thank the good. Appreciate the good. Tell the good that they're appreciated. Tell the people you love them. You can't do it often enough. Can't do it often enough. Tell the people you admire that you admire them. And just get away from the people who are destructive in your life, who are not good for you. Right? What was this? Something here that I saw before. Yeah, Scott mentions gratitude. Yeah, express gratitude. Say thank you often to the people who add value to your life. Gratitude is a form of justice. Gratitude is really, really important in life. It, again, is an expression of your values. It supports the good. And it gives you the sense that you've paid for the good. Again, we talk about trade, win-win. Part of that trade is you expressing gratitude. You got something? Thank you. I really appreciated what you done, given me, and so on. Cultivate that. Practice it. Make it part of who you are. Again, in the context of making you the best person you can be. Love. Love is an act of justice. Love is an act of justice to yourself and to the person you love. But love. Don't give up on love. Find love, romantic love, and other forms of love. But particular romantic love, if you find somebody you truly love, God, that is so amazing. That is so beautiful and wonderful. Then fight for it. Invest in it. Dedicate yourself to it. Express it. Show gratitude for it. People give up on relationships, give up on love so often. Can hate be justice? Absolutely. There are people who deserve your hatred. And the hatred is there. The emotion of hate, the evaluation that justifies the hate, is a self-defense mechanism. Somebody you hate is somebody who's done and can do you great harm. The hatred is there to prevent you from engaging with them, to prevent you from getting yourself in a situation where they do you great harm. It's a self-defense mechanism. Again, justice is selfish. Justice is there to help you live a better life. Now, again, it has to be rational. It has to be objective. But yeah, we live in a society that believes that, oh, hatred is a waste of time. You shouldn't hate people. You should forgive them again. I'm against forgiveness unless it's earned. I'm for hatred when it's earned. Oh, now we're going on love songs. There are a lot of good love songs. Yeah, a lot of good love songs. All right, let's see. So yeah, we're super chat, particularly if you have any questions on justice, any comments on justice, any things you would like me to talk about with regard to justice. Now's the time before I get to other super chat questions, because I see there's a bunch of super chat questions unrelated to this issue. You know, one of the reasons I get angry at people in the chat, one of the reasons I get angry in debates, it's because it angers me to see irrationality. It's unjust to stay quiet in the face of irrationality, in the face of, you know, horrible, evil ideas. I can't do it. I can't do it. If I see an injustice, if I see something wrong, if I see people committing bad acts, you can't just stay silent. You've got to act on it. And the same with the good. If you see something good, you've got to act on it. You've got to do something. All right, Michael asked, this one relates to, I think this is the only justice question I got. So if there's any other super chat questions for justice, comments, suggestions, contributions, anything like that, now's the time to do it. We're barely gotten started on the super chat thing, so we're still $500 behind. Whereas yesterday we were at $650 within minutes. Today we're way behind. So Catherine, who's here, yeah, you gotta start. You got to start promoting, bugging people. All right. Michael says, if you can't achieve justice against somebody who has wronged you, at what point should you move on? Well, at the point where if you can't achieve justice, then you've got to just move on. At that point where you realize you can't achieve it, you got to move on. You can dedicate your life to the bad guys, in a sense, to dealing with the bad guys, to dealing with bad stuff, right? To dealing with bad stuff. So you've got to pick and choose. And you've got to focus, pick and choose. You've got to focus on your life. And in the context of your life, when it becomes way too much, or where it becomes distracting, or when it becomes impossible, then you've just got to move on. All right. Let's see. And Daniel, thank you. Really appreciate the support. And of course, look, your job in life is not to go out there and seek to penalize all the bad people out there, or even the people who hurt you. Again, the focus on justice, it should be primarily on the good. The focus on justice should be on making your life better. The focus on justice should be to support the good and to surround yourself with people who are positive, who support your life, who are enhancing of your values and your life and your success and your potential to be happy. Right? All right, let's see. All right, interesting. No questions on justice. That's curious. Usually they are. Usually people are confused about certain things about this, but maybe we've talked about this a lot on the show. Make something good, yeah, always. A force field of good. I don't think you can make a force field of good, but you can certainly create you can surround yourself. You know, you can, as I've said often, you can minimize the news, which is all negative. You could focus your attention and focus your energy and focus your time on good things going on in the world, on things you enjoy, on things you love. You can avoid and ignore and walk away from people who are harmful to you, and you can spend more time with people who enhance your life, who make your life better, who promote the values that you promote. You can spend the resources to go find the people that are going to be good for you. You can create a positive force field around you. And at the same time, not ignore the world. Not ignore the fact that there is a lot of bad and evil around there in the world. And there is. All right. Jennifer asks, do you think there should be a statute of limitations for certain crimes? Yes, I do. You know, I don't, and the reason is that time makes proving beyond a reasonable doubt more and more difficult. And at some point, there's just no way to be objective about what happened 20, 30 years ago. Now, some crimes are so heinous that it's worth making the effort to do it, right? But there's some crimes where it's just, it's too difficult, and you know, you just can't get to that level. Now, as, I don't know, evidence become more objective, so let's, for example, DNA evidence, it doesn't require memory and doesn't require, maybe the DNA was collected back then, but just, then, you know, maybe we can do away with statute of limitations as we rely less and less on things that diminish through time. So, but other things, and which kind of crimes should have statute of limitations and which should not, hard to tell. You know, there was the whole thing about, I don't know, Kavanaugh, if you remember the Kavanaugh hearings, and this is something that he was accused of doing when he was it when he was a high school kid? Or was he a college kid? I can't remember, but a long time ago, right? And there's no DNA evidence, there's no physical evidence, there's no reports from the time. And how do you know, people's memories 30, 40 years later, there's no way to you know, act objectively do it. And Frank says there's no way to actually launch a defense so long after the crime. Now, again, there's certain crimes that, where the evidence is such that it overwhelms all that. But again, this is the kind of stuff that you would have to have a legal philosopher really think through and where this would apply and where it wouldn't apply. But it really is, in order to mount a defense on myself, I have to be able to have access to the crime scene, evidence, things that are going, and after a certain amount of time, that is not possible. But there is no statute of limitations, I think, for murder. And with DNA evidence now, they're finding, it's interesting how they're finding now, murderers who committed murders decades ago, and because of the DNA evidence, they now can find them. And that's pretty amazing. But that's the kind of evidence there's really no basis to challenge. Yeah, Tom says, I barely remember what I did last week, let alone 10 or 20 years ago. I certainly feel that way. So the more time passes, the less objective the case of justice is because of the difficulty of mounting a defense and being objective about a verdict. Daniel asks, I know this is an old story. What is your opinion on the Texas power crisis of 2021, ERCOT? Wikipedia says it's due to deregulation of the electricity market. Some people say it's the failure of capitalism. Whose fault? No, it's clearly not deregulation, although it might be the fault of re-regulation, that is the changes in regulation. There's almost never any real deregulation. It's usually just a change of regulation, which then the new set of regulations usually do real harm and real damage. And it's certainly not the failure of capitalism, because there is no capitalism in electricity and in power delivery, which is so dominated by the state. Rates are often set by the state. The state is both subsidizes stuff and penalizes other stuff. So no, it can't be capitalism because there was no capitalism. And I don't know enough about the Texas regulatory market to say what happened, what the deregulation did, what was deregulated, what wasn't deregulated, and so on, right? But from my understanding, the crisis was a consequence of the what do you call it? The emphasis that has been placed by government and by energy authorities, and remember, energy markets are super regulated. The emphasis that is being placed when it comes to generating electricity on so-called alternatives, on what Alex Epstein calls unreliables. And as a consequence of that, the neglect that has resulted in traditional oil and gas, electricity producing facilities. And that neglect resulted in the fact that these traditional producers were not prepared for the cold, were not equipped to handle the cold in 2021. And at the same time, all the investments that had gone into windmills and solar failed because in some cases at least, windmills froze, didn't function properly, the wind didn't blow as much as people expected. And of course, during bad weather, often the sun doesn't shine. So the fact that the traditional suppliers of electricity failed because of lack of investment, lack of maintenance, and then the so-called alternatives, the unreliables, were unreliable, you got the energy crisis of 2021. But from beginning to end, this is a crisis of regulation, 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 and regulation. This is a crisis of government. This is a crisis of the wrong things being the wrong things. The fact that they try to subsidize things, the fact that they try to move the energy market in particular directions, the fact that certain energy plants are approved and other energy sources are not approved, the fact that we haven't invested in nuclear. Nuclear is perfect for cold, hot, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's unbelievably resilient. And the fact that we are fantasizing about windmills and solar panels replacing natural gas and coal and oil as sources of energy, and particularly of electricity. And those fantasies are leading people to make bad decisions. But those are not consequences of capitalism, and they're not consequences of a free, unregulated market. Quite the opposite. They're a consequence of a market heavily manipulated, heavily controlled. So no, I mean, part of the answer is always, was there capitalism when this happened? If there was no capitalism when this happened, how could have capitalism caused this? All right, let's see. Oh, we're way behind on the super chat. I'm not sure what we'll do today, what we're going to do today, but we're basically, we've still got $500 to go. So we've only raised $150 of the $650 that is a goal every session. Catherine, you've got a lot of work to do. So we're at 500. We have 150 raised, 500 to go. We've got a few super chats, but not that many today. Yeah, there are not that many people watching live. The Rules for Life, maybe, or maybe it's just the time, or maybe it's just a Sunday, or maybe whatever. But it would be great if somehow we could get close to 650 today. Maybe some of our whales, maybe some people who really love these Rules for Life shows can step in and engage and get us over the hump, get us to where we need to be so that we make these possible. Now, the nice thing is that all the Rules of Life shows are sponsored. We have a sponsor who basically provides $1,000 a month to do shows on Rules for Life. In that sense, we're going to continue as long as he's willing to fund it. We will continue to do these shows. But it's still good to be able to raise the regular quota for the show. So value for value, guys. See if you can do it with 150 going on 650. All right, Michael asks. Ginger, thank you. Really appreciate that. Is the reason objectivism is having a hard time catching on not only psychoepistemology, psychoepistemological, but because most people haven't developed the self-esteem on their own to recognize the power and sense of justice of the philosophy. Look, the reason it's not catching on is multiple. But at the core, it is a psychoepistemological issue. It's an issue of respect for reason, the use of reason, the application of reason, which is what psychoepistemology is. It's the connection between our psychology and our method of thinking. And it is part of how we establish our self-esteem. So if you have an unhealthy psychoepistemology, if you are irrational or don't behave in accordance with your own values, or you might be rationally thought, but then ignore that and behave irrationally, then it's probable you won't have the self-esteem necessary. So there's no question for objectivism to be successful in the culture, you need people to have self-esteem. You need people to have courage. You need people to have the capacity to be able to say, I can manage by myself. I can deal with reality. I can deal with the world. I am not dependent. I can live a good life. Because how is objectivism going to catch on to a culture where people hold, I'm useless, I'm pathetic, I'm sinful, I can never be good? I mean, people like that are not open to objectivism, particularly as they grow older in life. So they might hold those ideas, but then they have to have a psychoepistemology that is willing to question those. Oh, I just identified a fact that contradicts what I believe about myself. I'm going to have to change. I mean, that happens to a lot of us when we read Ayn Rand. We have to recalibrate. We have to change. And in that sense, the primary is our willingness to change, our honesty, and our capacity to change, our rationality. So in that sense, the psychoepistemology is pretty basic. Self-esteem is a consequence. But you have to have some basic foundation, some basic foundation. So freedom requires a particular psychology. To really live an objectivist life, you have to have a particular psychology. But the beauty is, once you identify philosophically the philosophy, you can now build your psychology. You can craft or create your soul and create your psychology. It's not easy. So it boils down to reason and a rational approach to life and honesty, a fundamental honesty. And if you have those, you can, I think you're open to objectivism. And if you don't, if you're not fundamentally rational, if you're not fundamentally focused on reality and on facts, then it's going to be very hard for you to accept objectivism. It's going to be challenging. Everything else, even a lack of self-esteem, can be ultimately overcome because you can, again, build your self-esteem. But for that, you need that rationality and honesty. Okay, Mick creates, MP creates. Thank you, MP. He writes, can you talk about the virtue of justice in the context of romantic relationships? Specifically, breaking up with someone that you respect and you still love some part of them, but there is no longer a future together. Thank you. Yes, I mean, you have to, particularly in close relationships that require significant investment of time and mental and emotional resources, you have to be able to judge how much to invest. Again, this is an issue of justice. What is right to you to invest? What makes sense for you to invest where you're not over-investing, given the value that this person represents for you? And you can be heavily involved with somebody and come to the realization that they're not good for you. Your future with them, you don't have a future with them. But you're emotionally tied to them, and it's very, very difficult to separate yourself from them. But you know it's the right thing because you're over-invested. What you're investing, you're not getting a return. You're not, the return you get, the relationship you get in return to the investment doesn't justify the investment. And it prevents you from going out there, particularly in a romantic relationship. It prevents you from going out there and maybe potentially finding something better. Something where the investment is justified. So justice requires, in that case, justice towards you, your time, and of course the other person, because you don't want to keep them under the illusion that there's a long-term prospect for the relationship when there isn't. Justice requires that you break it off. Justice requires that you move on. You can still love some part of them, you can still appreciate them, but you can't invest in them the amount of time, energy, emotion that you invested in them when you believed this was a long-term relationship. So you got to cut it off, and you got to do it quickly, and you got to do it thoroughly. You can't be tempted back because it's bad for you. And this is, again, this is the whole thing. Everything is, the standard is this good for you? How good? And is it the best that you can do right now? And is it worth the investment? Justice requires you to really think those through and act according to the conclusions. And sometimes that's hard. Breaking up with somebody is never easy. Never easy. And the closer you are to them, the harder it is to break up with them. Hopefully that answers your questions, MP creates. And it's an issue of justice, again, towards you, your life, your values. Oops. All right, Jace Christo. What do you think about using technology to improve the recruitment for jobs, like connecting the right people to the right jobs? Thoughts on the hidden job market? Yeah, I mean, I think to the extent that the technology is good, to the extent that we have good measures of which people fit to which jobs, and to the extent that we can actually test for those things and evaluate those things, I think technology is great for doing that. And I think you trying to figure out what you're good at and what a good job would be for you, I think there are probably some software applications out there that might give you a good start at that kind of evaluation. So absolutely, I'm pro using technology. I'm not sure exactly what you mean by the hidden job market. Maybe in the not super chat, in the regular chat, you can just elaborate a little bit of what you mean by the hidden job market. So I'm all for using technology. I don't know how good it is. That's my only issue, right? I find recruiting very, very difficult. I found it personally. Picking the right person for the right jobs, very, very difficult. And, you know, to the extent that you could, wow, Troy, thank you. Troy's just come in and basically taken us to 650 or very close to it. So thank you, Troy. I really appreciate it. I'm glad you're still enjoying the positive shows. Glad you're still enjoying the Rules for Life shows. So if the technology is good, I'm for it. If the technology is not so good, not so for it. Right? So, jobs available but not listed. Look, I think there are a lot of jobs available and not listed. I know a lot of technology companies that are constantly hiring. I don't think they list every job that they have. A lot of the jobs that they get are referrals. A lot of the interviews they get are referrals. You know, so recruiters from Amazon, for example, are constantly trying to find people, constantly, whether their job is listed or not. They're constantly searching. They're actively recruiting. They're actively trying to get people from other places, from other, you know, other jobs, recruiting them away from their existing jobs. So you have, I think there's a vast hidden job market. Now, what's interesting today is that the listed jobs out there far exceed the people looking for work. So there's an excess of unfilled jobs out there. But particularly on the high end, on the high skill, there are definitely hidden jobs. There are definitely jobs that are available, not listed. If you can get into the Amazon database so that they, you know, if you're a programmer, then they will call you regularly to see if you're available to interview you. If you interview, even if you don't make it in a particular job, but they generally like you, they generally support you, then they will often just move your name to a different pile and look, you know, recruit you for a different job in the same company. So it's constant. And you, if you're ambitious, then you should be constantly looking, just like people like Amazon are constantly looking for talent. You as talent should constantly be looking for the best job possible, for the best opportunity possible. Unless you have the perfect job, and then that's great. But you should always be on the lookout. You should always be searching. Right. Yeah, Jace, if I haven't answered completely, let me know if I've missed something. All right, Jupiter Menace. Given the rise of the woke left and nationalist right, do you view that these times are the most irrational that you have seen in your lifetime? Where? In America? Maybe, probably. In the world? Probably not. I mean, we don't have a Soviet Union anymore. We don't have, the Nazis were defeated. The rise of Nazism and communism was probably more irrational than the woke and the nationalist right. I think America's in the worst place intellectually it's ever been, politically that it's ever been. Kind of the woke left, the left has always flirted with something like the woke left, right? In the 60s, you had the new left, you had the hippies. But you had an opposition. You had a Goldwater. Part of the irrationality that exists today is that the woke left are the hippies, but then the rest of the left is closer to them today than I think they were back in the 60s and 70s. There's no real Hubert Humphrey or people like that, or even Jimmy Carter, Bill Clinton, who are not wacky left, and the ones that are are so weak today. So there's no strong center left, and then there's no real opposition, not on important stuff. The only opposition that exists today is over cultural issues. And I agree with Wanda Freeman that the actual woke left is a tiny minority and very loud. And I think the actual nationalist right is a tiny minority. It's the populist right and the populist left that scare me. And I think they're the ones who will unite ultimately to give us just authoritarian populism, right? It's the populist right, which is the Donald Trump right. It's a right that's not particularly nationalist, that's not particularly anything. It's just whatever. It's hatred of the left on social issues and agreement with the left on economic issues. And on the left, you've got a populist left that is not really that woke. They don't really, the working class left, the Bernie Sanders left. Bernie Sanders is not really woke. He'll speak woke because he thinks he has to, but woke doesn't have the momentum. The momentum is being crushed. The woke momentum is being crushed. Look what happened in November in Virginia. Look what happened to the district attorney in San Francisco. Look what happened to the defund the police in Minneapolis. At every location out there, the woke left is being defeated. They still have their stronghold in the universities. Okay? They still affect the hiring decisions at corporations. But every time it gets into politics, anytime the people have to actually vote on it or express an opinion on it, it is thoroughly defeated, even defeated in bastions of leftism like San Francisco. Even defeated. Yeah, but it's in institutions that are going nowhere. People leave those institutions and they ultimately abandon that woke and they vote to get rid of it, which is what they did in San Francisco, which is what they did in Virginia, including Northern Virginia, which is pretty left, in Minneapolis, which is super left. It's being defeated across the board. I mean, it will morph into something else. I'm not saying leftism is being defeated or irrationality is being defeated. I wish. But the particular manifestation that we're seeing right now with wokeness, I mean, I read people on the center left. They all hate woke. They all resent woke. They're all anti-woke. But the populism on the left is statist, but it's not woke. That's why, like, people could switch from voting for Bernie Sanders to voting for Donald Trump to voting for Bernie Sanders. I don't think it's that big of a switch for those people. And I think you'll see more of that. And, you know, so yes, I think we're in about the most irrational place we could be, but let's realize that the woke left and the nationalist right are still small components in each side of that. I think the national right is going to have a lot more influence than the woke left, because I think the woke left is so irrational, so disintegrated, so antagonistic to everything people in this country still, even today, hold, that it cannot be victorious politically. So I think the nationalist right, which is much more consistent with America's spirit, some Americans, it disguises itself as pro-American. It disguises itself as pro-founders and things like that. It's much more appealing. And of course, it can wrap itself up with religion. So I think nationalist right, in my view, and I've said this often, is more dangerous long-term than the woke left. Daniel Duffy says, I'm torn about a new career path. There's potentially significant long-term health risks, and some of the skills aren't suited towards my strengths. On the other hand, there is potential for pride and purpose. Thoughts? Wow. I mean, significant long-term health risks. That's not good. You don't want to be in a work environment that creates significant long-term health risks. And then how can there be pride if you think the skills are not suited towards your strengths? Or is it the case that this new job would kind of, or is it that you can learn these new skills, get good at these new skills, and generate pride from that? So it really depends what it is. If this is a job you think you can do really, really well, which I think you can because it says a potential for pride and purpose, then that's fantastic. You want to stay away from long-term health risks if they're real. So maybe that should be a real factor in terms of your decision about this new career path. But in terms of skills that aren't suited towards your strength, I don't buy that if you think it's going to generate pride. If you think you can be successful, which is what generating pride means, if you think you're going to achieve something, which again is what generating pride means and purpose. So I think focus on the long-term health risk. Is that real? And how real is it? And can you minimize that? But anything that is going to result in pride and purpose, what more is there? What more can you want from a job than the ability to generate, the ability for you to experience pride and a profound sense of purpose? That's what you want to strive towards. Let me just address this. Because Scott says, I said that Stalin had to fail. He died at 75 as a dictator. Yeah, a miserable, pathetic, horrible, awful, disgusting life and death. And the only reason he, quote, succeeded was because he was bailed out by good people. He was bailed out by the U.S. in World War II. He was bailed out in the 1920s by the U.S. when basically his policies were causing starvation. It's the sanction of the victim that makes evil succeed. Whenever it succeeds, whenever you see evil succeed, it's because good guys stay quiet. Or it's because good guys literally help evil, literally provide them with assistance. So no, evil is not efficacious. Evil does not succeed. And if you think my assessment of the political world today is so wrong, and my assessment of Stalin is so wrong, my assessment of history is wrong, and my politics is wrong, and all that is wrong, then I ask you why you listen to this show. All right. Adam has a question. Adam asks, please comment on the global tide of national-theocratic political ideology. Putin in Russia, Orban in Hungary, Modi in India, Erdogan in Turkey, Buddhist National-Theocratic regimes in Myanmar and Sri Lanka, Bannon-Trump, the national conservatives. Yeah, I mean, I think this is the trend. I was hoping that if people realize to the extent to which Putin is being defeated right now, to that extent, that might mitigate the popularity of this approach. But I think that's too concrete. The fact is that the nationalist, religious nationalist approach is the approach on the right that is gaining traction, is the approach on the right gaining traction in all kinds of cultures, as you say, as remote as Russia, Eastern Europe, all the way to India and Turkey and the United States of America. And it is basically a consequence of the failure of the mixed economy, of the failure of liberalism, of the complete failure, right, of the voices of compromise and mixed economy and kind of liberal in the positive sense, but liberal but not too much freedom. It's a consequence, as Ayn Rand always said, a mixed economy, whether it's in economics or in ideas, is not a stable equilibrium, cannot survive. Ultimately, the more principled will win out. And the fact is that if you, the more principled here with regard to altruism, are the nationalist theocrats. And if you're going to compromise on religion, then the more principled are the religionists. If you're going to compromise on collectivism, then the more principled are the collectivists, the nationalists, the tribalists. And that's what you're seeing. You're seeing the rise of tribalism, of nationalism. On nationalism, on tribalism, and on religion. You're seeing the rise of these people, and it's all because the better people have been appeasers, compromisers. Bad ideas and bad ideologies and evil people can only rise and succeed because of the unwillingness of the good to be consistent, of the good to fight for good, but to identify what good is. And, you know, as long as we don't fight for capitalism and for rationality and individualism, we fight for some mushy concepts of, I don't know, America first, or what does the left fight for? I don't know. Just whatever they social justice or whatever the, you know, there's no alternatives there. There's just the more consistent application of statism, of nationalism, of tribalism, which is what we're talking about. Yeah, people long for Stalin because they long for tribalism, because you know what you're offering them is Trump, right? If the choice is, if people are, you know, if people are on the premise of collectivism and tribalism, Trump is too wishy-washy. Give me the real thing. Or if you've got even Putin, right? If Putin is acceptable, then Stalin is fantastic. People are looking for statist, collectivist, tribalist, authoritarian solutions, and that's what scares me. And if you think woke can stand before that, you're really delusional. Woke will collapse just like the communists in Germany collapsed with the rise of Nazism, just like the left always collapses. The non-authoritarian, wacky ideas always collapse in the face of a strong man. you're going to get a nationalist, theocratic, environmentalist, who knows what else, authoritarian. That's where we're heading towards. Of course, woke is authoritarianism, but it's authoritarianism it's a disintegrated authoritarianism. It's an authoritarianism that is not focused on any integrating principle. It's nihilistic. Woke is nihilism. And nihilism of that kind cannot achieve anything. Not in the long run. It can have short-term successes. It can brutalize the lives of people for a while, but it is not a ruling ideology. You need a governing, integrated principle to have a ruling ideology. All right. Scott asked, what is the standard for which groups are acceptable to work with? Prager University, like IAI, deals with philosophical issues, even if one disagrees with 99%. I think one big difference between Prager University and IAI is that IAI does not stand for philosophy. IAI does not represent a particular philosophical view. It presents a wide variety of points of view. A wide variety of points of view, which it does not take a stand in saying we're Kantians, or we're this, or we're socialist. Even though you might say generally they're on the left, they don't take a position. We're the leftist organization of this and this. They are a place where philosophical ideas of all kinds are presented. And that is certainly a place that I want objectivism to be presented. I want objectivism to be presented in any place that accepts a wide variety of points of view. And what I would like is to normalize the idea that objectivism is one of these many views out there. So that is one. They present themselves as a broad, open, wide variety of people. If you look at their conferences, while they might have Noam Chomsky there, but they also have Deirdre McCluskey. They'll also have Steven Pinker. They'll have a wide platform for a wider variety. So me going there doesn't say I agree with their ideas, because their ideas are wide. Prager University has one agenda, one platform. It is not a platform for a wide array of different points of view. It's a platform for one point of view. So when you go on there, the assumption automatically is you agree with that point of view. And if you have an opportunity to go on there in a context in which you, for example, a discussion with Prager or a debate, then you have to, your whole purpose should be to contrast your point of view from theirs, to make it clear unequivocally that you don't share a platform with them. One of the reasons I don't particularly like Freedom Fest, I've said this, is because they're too conservative libertarian. And I'm not a conservative libertarian, but when I go there, the assumption is that I am, because almost everybody is a conservative libertarian who goes up there. That's, that is the difference that I see between those two. But every organization is different. Every organization you have to evaluate, but the principle is, I do not want objectivism to be confused by any other ideology. I don't want it to be assumed that objectivists are conservatives, that objectivists think religion is okay. We don't. We think it's unbelievably damaging and horrific. We don't want to be viewed as leftist, but we're never going to be viewed as leftist. Like if I go on a leftist show, nobody is going to confuse me with a leftist, because Ayn Rand and everybody knows I'm not. But there are lots of people who confuse Ayn Rand as being conservative or libertarian. So going on a conservative or libertarian show requires much more value than going on a leftist show, because everybody knows I'm not a leftist. There'll never be a confusion over there. Right? So IAI, I think, is an ideal place. I'd love to I'd love to have my stuff appear in the Atlantic magazine. I'd love my stuff to appear in places which have a wide variety of points of view that are generally mainstream, that are not affiliated with conservatives or libertarians. That is the best place for us to publish. Best place for us to publish. No way anybody could ever confuse my views with a leftist. And if you read the article I published on IAI, it slams everybody that the left likes. From talking about, their favorite dictators like Mao and Stalin, and it's unequivocally not leftist. And again, Ayn Rand is never confused with a leftist. Ever. So nobody's going to confuse me with a leftist. And I don't hold any leftist ideas. None. Not a single one. Nobody honest thinks ARI is left-leaning, and there is no such thing as left-leaning objectivism. That is a misunderstanding of objectivism. You don't have an idea what objectivism is if you think there's such a thing as left-leaning objectivism. Okay? So it's not honest to call people left-leaning objectivists. You might disagree with them, but to bring in irrelevant concepts like left and right into the discussion about objectivism, there might be people who disagree about immigration. Harry Benswanger thinks that in a free society you should be able to cross a border, an international border, with nothing, no screening, nothing. And there are people who call themselves objectivists who think that even in a free society, we should not allow people in unless they pass a test to show that they respect individual rights or whatever. I don't know. Okay, there's a disagreement, but to call one right-leaning objectivist and another left-leaning objectivist is a complete misunderstanding of objectivism, of what right and left mean, and what the debate is all about. Some people are right, some people are wrong. That's the only issue. What is right and what is wrong? In the case of objectivism in politics, what's consistent with individual rights and what's not consistent with individual rights? That's it. There's no left or right within objectivism. Catherine, what is your take on keeping an extrovert friend if you are an introvert? Both add value to each other's lives, set boundaries when I don't want to hang out, but I get annoyed and have to say no a lot. Is being aggravated worth it? I don't know. Only you can tell that, right? So with every relationship, you have to figure out the cost and benefits. There are costs. There's energy, there's being annoyed sometimes, there's all kinds of things. And then the benefits. And I don't get annoyed, I don't think you should get annoyed by saying no a lot. So you say no a lot. Well, how expensive is that? That's not that expensive. Just say no. And get the friend used to the fact that you say no once, it means no, and that's it. Stop bugging you. But you can certainly, I'm certainly pro having friends who are different than you, who can bring out different things in you, who can expose you to new experiences. That's good. And you can be friends with people who fundamentally disagree with you about certain things. I think Ayn Rand had like opera friends who she liked to go to opera with, who she didn't agree with on philosophy or on other things, but they really, really enjoyed going to opera and talking about opera together, right? You can do that. You can have that. So your friends don't, but then you have to figure out, what's my friend good for? What's my relationship like? I'm not going to talk about these things. I'm not going to invite him to these dinner parties. These are the things I'm going to do. And I'm going to be honest and say yes, and I'm going to say no when it's appropriate. And then you have to weigh the costs and benefits of those kind of relationships. All right. Michael asked, are you going to react to Richard Wolff's appearance of Lex Friedman Lex has really treated him with kid gloves. Probably not. I mean, I've said what I've got to say about Richard Wolff, and there'll probably be occasion to say it again. But it's very hard to react to a 3-hour discussion. I have no interest in being disrespectful in any way to Lex or being perceived as critical of Lex, because I think basically Lex is a good guy. I don't think Lex should have given somebody like Rich Wolff a platform, but it's Lex's platform. He can do what he wants with it. I don't think Richard Wolff rises to present enough of a value for somebody like Lex to give him a platform, given who Lex has had and has on his platform. But he did it. But there's nothing for me to comment on. If you guys think, I'm not going to listen to it. I can't stand Richard Wolff. But if you guys have a particular segment where Richard Wolff says something particularly obnoxious that you think I should comment on, I'll comment on it. I have no intention of commenting on anything Lex says. There's no reason to. He's a friend. But if there's a particular segment of Richard Wolff that you think is worth, hey, Richard Wolff has said something here that you should comment on, Yaron, then I'll be happy to do that. But I'm not going to listen to 3 hours of Richard Wolff. That would drive me crazy. Hopper Campbell says, I forgot to ask this yesterday, but is there a relationship between single motherhood and crime? 3 out of 4 American black kids don't know who their father is. Yes, I think there is. I think that, again, single motherhood is something the welfare state reinforces and promotes, and well, I don't know if it promotes, but it certainly what do you call it? Incentivizes. But it is interesting to note that single motherhood is in decline in America, including in the American black community. Single motherhood was a lot worse in the 70s and in the 80s, and is in decline. And it could be that decline is partially responsible for the decline in violence over the last 30 years. But then how do we explain the spike in violence that we've seen recently? Now, the spike has not been as high as it was if we go back to the 90s, so maybe that's it. I think the spike primarily has to do with the 2020 riots, the ideology of disrespect of the rule of law and disrespect of the police and disrespect of America, and the constant drumbeat from the intellectuals on the left on the evil that is America, on the illegitimacy of America, on the fact that America owes the black community something. As I've said often, I think the black community in the United States is being betrayed by its intellectuals. I think black intellectuals are the ones responsible for what's going on in the black communities, and I think them constantly describing the American government, the American history as illegitimate, as immoral and unjust, and that nothing has gotten better and nothing has changed. I think that has a lot more to do with the increase in crime. But yes, generally kids who are brought up with single mothers have a greater susceptibility to crime. Again, you don't want to say that all of them are, because that's just not true, but have a greater susceptibility to it. Hopper Campbell, and why is New York City so much safer than Chicago and Philadelphia? What about India? I don't know about India, and I don't have the map here to figure it out. I think India is more violent, if I remember right, more violent than other Asian countries, but still less violent in the United States. So you get more violence than other Asian countries. For example, again, Japan is the least violent place, or South Korea, or other Asian countries, but is not as violent as the U.S. Why is New York so much safer than Chicago? Hard to tell. I think generally New York has had a police force and a local government that has been maybe better than than it has been in Chicago. I think New York has, over the last 30 years, New York has been a dynamic, has been a dynamic place. Chicago has not. Chicago is bankrupt. Chicago schools are worse than New York schools. But Chicago is a place, I think, if you're poor, it's a place of despair. I think New York, if you're poor, there's less of that. I think New York, there are more opportunities. It's more dynamic. It's more forward-looking. If you look at just the dynamism of Manhattan, the job creation, the way what Brooklyn has become, what the boroughs have become, and I think there's just more opportunities to work, more opportunities to rise, more opportunities to succeed. I think Chicago and places like St. Louis and a lot of the Midwest has a lot of what I call desperation there. They have a lot of this melee, a lot of the idea we're just stuck and we can't go anywhere and we can't be successful. And that's why gangs, I think, have been more successful in Chicago than they have been in New York. I think in New York had its gang problem, but I think because of relatively good policing and then ultimately creating a dynamic economy has made that go away, whereas in Chicago, it's still around. And you can see it in the fact that New York has elected a Democrat as mayor, but he's a pretty good law and order Democrat. Whereas in Chicago, they keep electing these losers as mayors who are bad on policing, who are bad on economic development, who are bad on job creation, who are just bad on everything. And you just see the malaise and the I don't know, the depression affect Chicago. All right, Liam, did Aristotle speak of something equivalent to the benevolent universe premise the way Ayn Rand did? I doubt it, but I don't know enough about Aristotle to know. I doubt that he did, but I don't know. Kiki's delivery service is not in the Top Gun show. I think I haven't missed a show, but I didn't see the Kiki review, and I was looking forward to it. So if somebody knows where the Kiki review is, I know I did it, right? We know I did it. It's a question of which show was it, and I'm just doing a quick look at recent shows. Whoops. See if I can find it quickly. Yeah, you're right. It wasn't in the Top Gun review, so it was earlier than that. So if anybody knows, if anybody remembers, maybe Shazbot is on here, maybe he remembers which show I did the Kiki review. 000 Annex 000 would like to know, and we'll try to get you an answer at some point. Either it'll come through today, or if not, I'll try to get you an answer in a future show. Michael asks, has seeing all the ugliness and nihilism out there made you more paranoid than most people are against you, that most people are against you and trying to undermine you in some way? Does it make it harder to get close to new people? No, I mean, no. I'm a pretty benevolent person, and I don't let the ugliness and nihilism get to me. I certainly don't feel paranoid. Who's after me? I mean, I'm sure there are people at YouTube and other places that are trying to throttle my content a little bit and stuff like that, but okay. I mean, to let that get to me and change my behavior and cause me to obsess about it would be bizarre. So, and the same about make it harder to get close to new people. I find it pretty hard to get close to new people generally, but I don't think it's because nihilism and ugliness. I mean, some of it's because of disappointment. I've been disappointed by a lot of people in my past, so that makes me a little bit more wary, but not because of nihilism. Ashton, thank you, $100. Really appreciate that. Ashton says, the leftist ideology is ridden in hypocrisy. It's an ideology that constantly pushes for multiculturalism and an end to racism, but it's also an ideology that despises free trade and capitalism, which is the only way to achieve multicultural, multiracial society. Absolutely. And more than that, it's become racist. It's become racist in and of itself. So it doesn't really push an end to racism. It pushes their kind of racism, the racism against anybody, you know, who happens to be white, right? So they are pushing a form of racism and are pushing people to identify themselves based on race. That's the thing that makes them most racist. They push people to identify themselves in terms of race in an effort to end racism, which is the exact opposite of what you have to do. You have to learn to ignore race, or to ignore the external features of the myth that is race. You have to ignore skin color. You have to ignore the ethnic origins. You have to ignore these things. That's how you end racism, and that's what capitalism and free trade do. And they're opposed to true anti-racism. They're opposed to real multiculturalism. See, well, this is the thing with multiculturalism. Multiculturalism is an anti-concept. Multiculturalism is the idea that all cultures are equal. That's wrong and false. And what it's trying to undermine is the idea that a society with a diversity of cultures in the things that are not important and who embrace a common shared values where they are important. For example, they share freedom, they share the idea of property rights, they share the idea of, you know, the political idea, they share the idea of individualism, most importantly. But they each like their own food, maybe they have a certain appreciation for their own music or whatever. That kind of society is not a multicultural society. It's a society of many cultures without being multicultural, because without thinking of itself as all cultures are equal. No, the beauty of people who emigrate to the United States, real immigrants to the United States, come here because they want to escape their culture. Because they think this is a better culture. Because they think this is a better place. That's why they come here. So the left, in that sense, yes, completely riddled with ideology. Unfortunately, so is the right. Hypocrisy is essentially a feature of false ideologies. Frank asks, can Hayek's view of justice as rules of contact promoting peace and consistent law be reconciled with Rand's ethical view of justice as judgment of moral worth? Yes and no, because Hayek deals with justice as a political concept, not as a moral concept. So when one transitions from Rand's moral concept of justice to the political concept of justice, then if one interprets it right, if one is very generous with Hayek's interpretation of consistent with promoting peace and consistent law, if one interprets that as protecting individual rights, then that is that can be consistent with Rand's view of justice as applied to law, as applied to politics. But Hayek is dealing with it as a political concept. Rand is dealing with it as a moral concept, although she does deal with it also as a political concept. And in politics, they're more aligned, even though they're not aligned completely. This is very difficult, because Hayek does not recognize the concept of individual rights, as far as I can tell. That's not an important idea for him. And that's why much of his writing on consistent law and constitutions is convoluted and often compromising. Okay, Daniel says, thanks, Yaron, for the answer. People still blame capitalism to this time. Yeah, they blame capitalism for the Great Depression. They blame capitalism for the Great Recession. They blame capitalism for every bad thing that happens, even when it's proven it's not the case. James asked, is getting a lap dance the equivalent of cheating on your spouse, and how much dollar for you to come with us to a strip club? Not if you are honest about it. So if going to a strip club and getting a lap dance is something you hide from your wife, then there's a real question about honesty. And there's a real question about your relationship and how upfront you are with the relationship. I mean, the first time I ever went to a strip club, I think it was in Houston. I called my wife up and told her I was going to a strip club. And I mean, the beauty was that my wife's response was, shit, you know, I'm really angry. I said, why? I said, that I can't come with you. That was her response. But of course, go, have a good time. So that's the issue. I think the issue with it is what you're cheating is the dishonesty that's related to it. How much dollars for you to come with us to a strip club? It would depend who us is. It depends on the strip club, you know, where it is, what it is. You might not have to pay me. But, you know, we can talk. We can come up with an agreeable amount of money. But it depends. It depends, right? You know, I am not, you know, my best experiences at strip clubs have always been with my wife, not when she's not around. Dishonesty is the real problem. Yes. All right. Michael says, a lot of psychologists say you have to forgive for your own selfish well-being. How is moving on different from forgiveness? Well, you can move on in a sense that it doesn't consume you or that you're not acting on it, but not forgive. It's in the background. You've never forgiven. You hate the bastard. You don't like them. And it's there, but you're not acting on it. You're not doing anything about it because there's nothing to do. And I'm not about forgiving. I'm not about forgiving. I don't believe in forgiveness unless it's earned. Forgiveness has to be earned. But I am about moving on. Absolutely move on. You got to move on with your life. Certain injustices that people commit against you, there's nothing you can do about them other than separate and walk away. But you're going to remember them. There's certain people I hate. I don't do anything about it other than avoid them. And I've moved on. I don't think of them. But if I think of them, the emotion that comes out is hate, and that's fine. That's good. It reminds me, stay away from that guy. My wife does my wife use curse words? No comment. You'll have to ask that. You have to ask her. I'm not going to talk about my wife. Daniel asked, have you been to the island of Calibre? Not yet. I have not. Looking forward to going there. Here the beaches are amazing over there. All right. Proper asks, if religious parents offer you money for school with strings attached, is it better to not accept the money and graduate later from working, or is it better to just go through the motions of religion? Wow. So what are the strings? The strings I have to go to church every Sunday? I mean, what are the strings? And how binding are the strings? And how offensive are the strings? I mean, the more restrictive, the more offensive, the more destructive to your own psyche, the less likely it is you should accept the strings. So it really depends on what they are and how bad it is. I wouldn't accept going to church for my parents paying for my education. That would not be acceptable to me. But you know, do you have to come once in a while and celebrate Christmas with them, or come once in a while and say grace at dinner? That's fine. I can do that. Once in a while is different than, let's say, every Sunday. I mean, you just have to figure it out. But generally, going through the motions of religion, to what extent is that harmful to you? And how much of the going through the motion? Every day, every week, 3 times a year? Again, cost and benefits. You have to weigh it that way. But you know, ultimately, you want your parents to know you're not religious, because otherwise you're accepting the money under false pretense. You want to let them know that you're doing this under protest. You want to let them know, because otherwise you're lying. And again, you're getting money from them based on a lie. And that's never healthy. It's never good for you. So I would never accept the money on the basis of a lie. Daniel asks, any updates on Leonard Piekoff? Can we get him somehow on a long-form podcast? You know, Leonard tells me he's retired and he doesn't want to do long-form podcasts, and he doesn't want to engage in ideas. I mean, he did the operetta lecture because it was such a passion. And he found it so interesting and so consistent with what he was doing in his life at that point. But he's not interested in getting deeply into a discussion of ideas, a discussion of philosophy, or discussing of politics. I mean, once in a while he'll go and he'll do something like he did with the Amy Piekoff show because he's ticked off at some issue and he wants to express himself. He does that, but more broadly, we've talked about him coming on my show and talking about history, and maybe we'll do that. Maybe we'll see. But yeah, I don't know. Any updates on him? I exchanged some emails with him the other day. I'm definitely going to see him when I'm in California in August. We schedule dates, you know, so I'm going to see him a couple of times. So probably spend a good, 10 hours with him while I'm out in California. I hope that's been the pattern in the past. So we'll spend a lot of time together. My wife will come as well. So we'll have a good time. We'll go out to dinner. We'll talk. My only regret really for not being in California is not being closer to him, because when I was in California, we'd see each other all the time. And since I moved to Puerto Rico, I only see him, like it's been a year, which is less than a year. It was in the fall, but it does not make me happy that I'm not seeing him as often as I used to. He will be 90 next year, so he'll be 89 in October. So he'll be 89 in October. But every time I talk to him, he emphasizes the fact that he's retired, which means retired from intellectual activity. That's what he tells me. Yes, I don't think he'll be doing podcasts, but I do expect to see him and so on. Scott says Greenspan is 96. That's pretty amazing that Greenspan is held up. And I think Leonard is going to make it to mid-90s. There's no reason not to. I mean, he seems okay, and his mind is certainly there. I mean, memory, things like that, like all of us. But I think Leonard's going to make it into his mid-90s. Good chance. K-Fax says, never think of pain or danger or enemies in a moment longer than is necessary to fight them. Excellent. Absolutely. There's no reason to think of them, but it doesn't mean you forgive them because you're not thinking of them. It's not the same concept. But yes, I agree with you completely, K-Fax. Ashton. Wow, Ashton. Very generous. Thank you. Another $50. Have you ever come out of a debate with someone and felt like you completely owned him? I don't know. I always come out with a debate thinking, ooh, I should have said this, or I could have said that. Ooh, this would have been better. I usually come out with it a little frustrated because you always can look back and say, oh, something about it I could have done better. But I think I own Wolf. There have been some other debates where, yeah, I think I've come across, yeah, there have been some debates where I thought I did, yes, I've owned this guy. I don't know if the audience thought that, but I thought that. There was a guy, you can find them all these debates online. There was a guy debated on the financial crisis for the Fort Hall Forum years ago, 2010, 2011, something like that. And yeah, I mean, he didn't have a clue. And I completely had him. Most of the debates, though, the other party makes good points from their perspective and their audience to their audience. And I think I own them, but I don't go away and say, yes. Debates are hard. they're hard. And you usually walk away saying, "Oh, if only I did this or that." Yeah, Richard Wolff. If Richard Wolff had been there in person, if he got angry with me in person, that would have been a lot better. Okay, Michael. Last two questions. Michael asked, Stalin was so paranoid. Or Michael says, I think, Stalin was so paranoid he slept in different bedrooms every night. Yeah, and he probably was killed by his chief of secret police. And he was a miserable, horrible, awful life. So he was a failure. And everything that he did, he was a failure. People suffered. If he was a great charismatic leader, his people suffered. His people died of starvation. People hated him. People didn't love him. People probably love him more today than they did back then, because they have a nostalgia for a strong man. What else? Yeah, I mean, he couldn't have survived without U.S. help. He would have been much poorer. Many more people would have died. He probably would have been killed if not for American help. So no, there's nothing good that comes, nothing from dictators. Whoops, what did I do there? So Catherine asks, what's the price for me to fund to get you in a suit for a live show? Suit means tie. You want to wear a tie for a live show? What would it have to be? I don't know, it would be big bucks, like $5K or something. It would be a lot of money. It would have to be a lot of money. I don't wear ties even for formal speeches anymore. Don't like them. All right, everybody. In spite of the fact that I had my doubts in the beginning, we blew away the target. Thank you, Troy, again from Australia. Thank you, Ashton. Thank you for all the super chatters who participated today. We're above $900, but really appreciate it. And I will see you again on Tuesday at 8 p.m. and then Thursday at 8 p.m. So Tuesday and Thursday, 8 p.m. Yeah, if you want to support the show, those of you not live, the super chatters are doing an unbelievable job supporting the show. So they're fantastic. Those of you who are not live and who can't participate in the super chat, then you guys can support me. And you know, if all of you did as well as the super chatters, it would be amazing. But you can support me on yaronbrookshow.com/support. $2, $10, $50 a month, $500 a month, whatever you can afford, whatever value this show represents for you, please express it with your support. So you can do that, yaronbrookshow.com/support, Patreon, subscribe, Star Locals. Don't forget to like the show before you leave, and I will see you on Tuesday. Have a great week, and don't forget to practice